on a holy Roman, Sorry. Let's go on a holy road. I want to say holy rolling road trip again.
Holy rolling.
You're listening to the Pithy Chronicle. History with a bite. I'm Caroline.
And I'm Erica. And we bring you history's dirtiest deeds, dripping with sarcasm.
Are you hungry yet?
Greetings, history buffs and time travelers. Welcome to another episode of the Pithy Chronicle, the podcast where we make history less newsworthy and more LOL worthy. I'm Erica.
Oh my god. Are you serious? Your intros are getting weirder and weirder.
I know. That's my goal.
I guess history can be snoozeworthy, but I disagree with that. Okay, fine. I'm Caroline, and today Erica is clearly drunkenly diving back into the drama, or at least is punch drunkenly diving back into the drama that is Eleanor of Aquitaine. And spoiler alert, it is seriously better than any soap opera you have ever seen. But first, let's do some housekeeping.
The Pithy Chronicle is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and now on YouTube. Writing a review or giving us a rating is the best way for you to help us get found and continue to dish that historical hot goss. If you would like to support us with some cash money, you can keep us hot and keep us hydrated by buying us a coffee at buyusacoffee.com/The Pithy Chronicle. And if you're into long-term relationships, hit us up on Patreon for extra content and episodes delivered to your inbox. Now, back to the show.
Yay! Shall we recap for those that got lost on the Second Crusade and just can't remember what happened?
She is rich. She's beautiful, intelligent, queen with a muddy grip on power in France. She's not in power. She's not out of power. She owns essentially a quarter of the country and has more centralized power in her pinky than the entire monarchy, but they are trying to keep this bad bitch down. Louis, her husband, is ill-equipped to physically and intellectually and culturally handle her.
And sexually.
And he is guiltily obsessed with her. He super wants her, but also believes it's not really appropriate to just sleep with his wife unless they're gunning for an heir, per the
Which, of course, they were, so, go for it.
Per the staunch Catholic beliefs of the time. And while we're at it, let's just say that he took things a bit far than maybe your normal Catholic at the time.
Yeah.
While they were almost 10 billion% sure she was a virgin upon her marriage, she was reading and listening to the most salacious smut imaginable at her father's court in Aquitaine, and grew up where it was totally normal to casually lock your mistress in a tower for your pleasure. The man wrote this: "Every joy must abase itself, and every might obey, in the presence of my master, for the sweetness of her welcome, for her beautiful and gentle look, and a man who wins to the joy of her love will live 100 years. The joy of her can make the sick man well again, and her wrath can make a well man die."
Oh my god.
So, what realistically is she supposed to expect when this is her norm?
Can you imagine having dinner with your family and talking about getting it on?
And that's the equivalent.
That is the equivalent.
And then you go to, quite literally, Gregorian chant and "I can't touch you."
And wearing a cilice, this hair shirt that is itchy and uncomfortable and hot. That's sexy.
It's not sexy.
No.
She did not get it regularly or well. Especially considering at this time the only sanctioned position for sex was missionary, if you were a good God-fearing Christian.
Obviously.
This is the case until the 1600s. Both parties are left in a terrible position with only a daughter and no heir, and neither spouse exactly excited to hop on to making another baby, which would mean that the crown would go either to one of Louis's brothers or be held in a regency situation until Marie got married.
I think it would depend on how long Louis lived and how long she'd been married.
Right. But who do you think Louis's counselors and mother, Adelaide de Maurienne, wanted for the position of regent.
Brother.
Anyone but Eleanor. Right?
Sure. Anyone but the female raunchy lady that he's obsessed with.
It's not even so much the fact that she's a female, because Adelaide de Maurienne was happy to put her hat in the ring.
So kind of her.
Absolutely 5-star mother-in-law right there. And conveniently, right on time, there is a call for crusade.
Yeah.
This was an opportunity of a lifetime for everyone at the French court. So picture it. Edessa, a crusader state in danger of being toppled.
Oh, Lord.
Urgent calls for help are sent out to the west, reaching the Pope's ears in 1145. And let's remember, that is not a call from Manuel Komnenos, the Byzantine emperor. This is a call from the states that were set up at the end of the First Crusade. Manuel, at the time, was in a treaty with the Muslim leaders, and this only confirmed to the West that the Eastern Christians were in a state of apostasy and not to be trusted.
The Byzantine Empire was like, look, we live in the middle, and it just makes sense to have treaties with people that are of a different religion. And the West just could not figure this out.
No.
They are so confused.
Pope Eugenius III, in his infinite wisdom, issues a crusade bull, basically saying, hey, let's go on a holy rollin' road trip again, like our daddies.
Yeah, they had such a great time in the last crusade. Things went so swimmingly. Let's just do it again.
The sequel.
They grew up with the stories. It's like your grandfather talking about his time in the war. They heard this and they're like,
again.
I want to fight for Christendom. It sounds so romantic.
Enter Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, the hype man of the Crusades, who's also, fun fact, one of the theologians to hate Peter Abelard of Heloise and Abelard fame.
Yes.
And we covered them in our first season. It was one of our first launch episodes.
One of our very first episodes, yeah.
Constantly bringing it around like a lasso. We're cowboying this shit up.
Punch drunk indeed. Oh my god.
You bring it out in me.
All right, so
he's spreading the word, basically a recruiter. Come join us.
Very empowering speaker, supposedly.
He turns this whole thing into a redemption party, claiming that fighting in the crusade is not just a war, but a holy means of salvation, yada, yada, yada. We all want a free ticket to salvation. Been there, done that. So Louis is in the religious doghouse and needs to make a statement about his allegiance to the Pope after having a nasty interdict slapped on him and excommunicated sister-in-law, and that little issue of burning down a church with people inside.
Oops.
Whoopsie. So he is encouraged to take the cross, and with lots of fanfare on Easter Sunday, Louis kneels and pledges to join the crusade, and everyone responds jubilantly, yay! And then, in an unprecedented declaration of faith, Eleanor kneels to receive the cross as well.
I love this.
And she does not do it as Queen of France, but as Duchess of Aquitaine and Poitou, which was a very, very big statement. She was not rallying Louis's men, but her own.
Also, she was making it clear that he couldn't decide for her whether or not she would go as the representative of her own legal lands.
And in this act, she compelled her nobles, lords, and barons to join the cause.
And her nobles were a lot more than Louis's
more
nobles.
Power in the pinky. We don't technically know the reason she decided to join the crusade. It seems, and is portrayed in what I've read, as a shock that she decided to join. So here is what we know. There were power plays at court concerning the succession. 2, her hot uncle, had sent letters to the court requesting aid along with gifts to implore them to help. And 3, no one in France trusted Eleanor.
Well, no one in the court.
Yes, sorry, that's right. No one in the royal court in Paris.
I think she wanted to go on a really long vacation.
I don't know about the vacation.
With the way she packed, that's clearly what she thought was going to happen.
I mean, that's true. I don't think she went to help Louis.
I don't think she went for religious reasons.
Yeah, I don't really either.
Unless it was to pray for a male heir at holy sites in Jerusalem.
I could see that.
Because that was very essential.
I think that on some level, she probably wanted to ingratiate herself at court, and I don't think there was a good way to do that by staying behind.
She wasn't going to be made regent.
Nope, she wasn't going to be made regent.
Even though she and Louis were in this rocky situation, he was very obsessed with her, and he did really
that is true.
Think of her in a very protective way. And so I think that she realized she would lose her one ally at court and have zero power. So staying behind would be worse than going.
Yeah, literally to get out of France.
This sucks. I'm leaving.
I do think she wanted to see Raymond.
I'm intrigued that you say that. I've never read anything that she had any kind of a communication or a relationship with him prior to meeting him when she got there.
He sent gifts along with the plea for aid. Do I think that they had a friendship or a relationship outside of that? No, but anyone who is in a hostile situation, who is alone with no allies, her family is essentially dead except for Petronilla, who is a blight on the court because she's excommunicated because of
desire to marry a 50-year-old man when she was 14 years old, who had to divorce his first wife to do so.
That thing.
Yes, that.
So when he reaches out...
Yeah. She also lost her father at a very young age, so I can see that she is searching for that male figure who will not use her, not abuse her.
Just connection.
Understand her, because he came from the same culture, and perhaps nurture.
Yep.
And boy, will he nurture.
So whatever the reason... Eleanor, Louis, and 100K of their closest followers began their crusade. And this is just the French contingency. We'll meet the Germans later, much like Eleanor and Louis. Eleanor brought along many noble ladies as part of her retinue.
Her Amazons. Yes. Eleanor arrived, supposedly, in costume of an Amazon woman as they departed on the crusade. She and all of her ladies that she had convinced to do this suicidal task with her. They rode out in this very flamboyant manner, followed by their thousands of trunks of stuff. They almost single-handedly doubled the amount of luggage going on this crusade.
Yes, 100%.
And on top of that, it would at some points, many points, become a huge hindrance and probably be the reason that thousands of people lost their lives because they were hauling this crap instead of moving faster through enemy territory. But they did have this lovely notion of her and her girls as these Amazons that were ready to go fight for Christendom, almost warrior women in the way they presented themselves. Much like a lot of the medieval period, it was probably all for show, but still very exciting.
And a very lovely story that was.
Thank you.
One I had always believed. But do you want to know who the author is that everyone quotes regarding this particular myth?
I don't know. I actually don't know.
Do you remember Coniates, the one who claimed that Anaximena used her awesome Kegel skills to break her husband's dick?
I remember the second half. I don't know that the chronicler's name stuck as much as the impressive vaginal skills.
Yeah, not a super reliable source, in my humble opinion. Not only that, Coniates cites that it was a German queen that dressed as an Amazon.
Which makes more sense.
It does. He was making his record of events 70 years after the Second Crusade.
After the Second Crusade?
Yeah.
Oh.
It definitely sounds like something Eleanor would do, but let's consider the source and consider that much of what we know about her was written posthumously to fit a certain narrative.
A very anti-Eleanor narrative, because she's going to abandon France here in a minute.
Well, and naturally, I tracked down the source.
Jesus.
Are you surprised?
No, I'm not.
From Coniates. Quote, A cloud of enemies, a dreadful and death-dealing pestilence fell upon the Roman borders. I speak of the campaign of the Germans, joined by other kindred nations. Females were numbered among them, riding horseback in the manner of men, not on coverlets, side saddle, but unashamedly astride, and bearing lances and weapons as men do. Dressed in masculine garb, they conveyed a holy martial appearance, more mannish than the Amazons.
Well, I'm loving that. And I can also see that if you were someone living in a Muslim territory as the crusade passed, you might not know the difference between one and the other. Mm-hmm. They both speak foreign languages. They're both fighting for this religion that is aggressively trying to stamp yourself out.
And it's 70 years. So all this to say, it was meant to be a diss on the Europeans, but
it's awesome.
Really isn't. And quite frankly, it's silly that this should be attributed to Eleanor. However, there is narrative proof that there were women among the ranks, just not bare-breasted Amazons.
Damn. Although, how uncomfortable.
Yeah,
no thank you. We're making lots of gestures here. Ups and downs. It's not going to go well.
I know.
Okay. Byzantium.
Manuel Komnenos, the Byzantine emperor, was not pleased to discover another crusade headed toward Constantinople. The Second Crusade was wreaking havoc on his foreign policy, which included an alliance with Germany, Venice, and the Pope against the Normans, which is so funny because that's who they were like,
please come, hey. Normans, we need you, the last time.
Yeah. It also complicated the emperor's peaceful relationship with the Turkish Sultan of Rum. Manuel made a truce with the Sultan in 1146 to make certain that the crusade would not cause the Sultan to attack Byzantine lands in Asia. Please don't attack us because they're them, not us.
Very interesting because, of course, Europe thinks of Byzantium as this stronghold of Europeanness sitting there. And the Pope had never been to Byzantium. Mm-hmm. He did not know exactly how different it was. So Europeans had this vision of themselves being copied and pasted right there on the edge of this Western world.
Wow, nothing really changes.
Yeah, right. That is not what was happening.
Although his strategy was sound, the emperor's move confirmed for many Western Christians the apostasy of the Greeks, that they were not true believers, not true Christians, because you shouldn't be tangoing with the devil.
Yeah, I mean, his tail gets in the way.
The Crusaders left Paris in June of 1147, traveling via Metz through Bavaria, taking 2 weeks to cross Hungary and arriving at Belgrade in Bulgaria in mid-August. They had been in touch with envoys of Emperor Manuel Komnenos of the Byzantine Empire. Passage through Constantinople, of course, was vital, but the emperor was wary of the approaching army. Remember, he's got treaties. He's a man with a plan.
It's a bad sign if you're worried if you could even cross through this border city that you believe is the last stronghold of your own people.
Yes. Or if they're not going to let us in the gates, maybe we aren't as much friends as we think we are.
Well, then there's
The king and queen arrived in the fabled city on October 4th. They spent 3 weeks as the emperor's guests, staying at the Philippaeum, a favorite imperial hunting lodge. The lighter atmosphere may well have reminded Eleanor of her home in Aquitaine, undimmed by the drab, somber dullness of Paris, which seems so weird to say.
Eleanor probably did relate better to the Byzantines than she did to the Parisians.
Exactly, because she was well educated. She spoke several languages. She was in a sophisticated, more liberal court, which is also very weird to say of Constantinople.
But here we are.
And they stayed there a hot minute. They feted, and Manuel tried to make Louis swear to turn over any territories his army conquered back to the empire. Louis thought that he had come to fight the Turks and restore Christian rule, not expand the borders of the Byzantine Empire. And nevertheless, Louis rejected calls by some of his advisors to capture Constantinople and dispose of the Greek emperor.
I'd love to see him try.
Thing. Not the brightest bulb in the bunch, but man, did he shine bright on that one. Instead, he set out for Jerusalem, determined to fulfill his crusading vow and consult with the king of Jerusalem about further actions. But the end of October, they encountered deserters from the German Crusade who reported that the Turks had all but annihilated the Germans and now lay in wait for the French. A few days later, the French caught up with what was left of the Germans, including Emperor Conrad, who was suffering from a head wound. Together, Louis and Conrad's crusaders followed the Mediterranean coast, finally reaching Ephesus in time for Christmas. Here, however, Conrad decided he was too ill to continue, and he and his nobles took a ship back for Constantinople, while what was left of the foot soldiers continued with Louis's army, which is just so shady.
And they didn't speak the same language. It is a jackass move to abandon your poor, uneducated soldiers who have joined this probably more out of religious fervor and say, like, I'm going to take my ship back to safety. You go on with this guy that I don't really trust.
And I don't really like.
And he doesn't speak your language. Off you go.
Toodaloo.
Jackass move.
Before the end of October, the army crossed the Bosphorus and entered Asia, and they almost immediately came under frequent probing attacks as they marched onward. In early January 1148, disaster struck and Eleanor's reputation began its tumble into scandal, and let's face it, lies.
Eventually. She kind of deserved the first half.
On January 6th, the Crusaders had to cross Cadmus Mountains. It was a logistical nightmare for such a vast army under constant pressure from the Seljuk Turks.
Plus, they're hauling up all of those fancy dresses that she brought.
Command of the vanguard leading the crossing was given to a vassal of Eleanor's, and the plan was to wait for the rest of the army to avoid them becoming too strung out. When he got there, there was not enough room for the remainder of the force, and he moved on to make space for them. The Seljuk Turks took advantage of the situation and attacked the army as it stretched along the mountain roads.
They were sitting ducks.
It was slaughter. Louis himself was in grave danger, and 40 of his personal bodyguards lay among the dead.
40 bodyguards?
Yeah.
I feel like Beyonce needs to step it up.
For those increasingly hostile to the Pontiff and Queen, the failure of one of her vassals was all the ammunition they needed to blame Eleanor for the loss. It also stands to reason that if she had not packed so heavily and they had not brought so much freaking gold, we would have not had this issue. This also could have all been avoided if they were just because when he took the cross, I failed to mention.
You forgot. This is important.
Louis took a vow of celibacy for the crusade.
It's so much harder to get that required male heir.
Not only were they not doing it, they were not even sleeping in the same place so he could resist temptation.
And that just led to a further wedge between these two people that were already struggling to make it work.
I think Eleanor was a sexual being.
And we will learn that in next week's episode.
Yeah. It was just such a bad marriage.
Ta-da!
The next stage of this journey was no less perilous. Louis paid guides to lead the bulk of the army across the land while he, Eleanor, and some of his men sought safe passage by sea to Antioch.
What a jackass move. You guys go the long, dangerous way. We're just gonna take a boat.
The 3-day journey took a fortnight as the fleet was buffeted relentlessly by storms.
Seems like someone else thought they were taking the easy way out, too.
Divine retribution right there. Only about half of those who marched out of Italia reached Antioch alive.
So they arrived to find half their army gone.
The guides had taken the king's money and betrayed his men. Without supplies, soon reduced to eating their horses before they reached Anatolia. Here, they discovered it was impossible to find sufficient ships for the whole force at the price King Louis was willing to pay.
Willing to
pay. He had the money.
He just didn't want to pay for it.
Plague broke out on the Crusaders' camp, and at this junction, Louis abandoned his troops, took a ship with his wife and nobles to Antioch. Abandoned by their king, 3,000 French Crusaders are said to have converted to Islam in exchange for their lives.
I'm overwhelmed.
Yeah.
What is wrong with
no qualifications? Finally, we make it on this odyssey to Antioch, where now we get to talk about incest. Yay! But first, let's meet the uncle in question, the hunkle in question. Raymond of Poitiers, described as, quote, a lord of noble descent, of tall and elegant figure, the handsomest of princes on the earth, a man of charming affability and conversation, open-handed and magnificent beyond measure, unquote.
Magnificent
I mean, swoon.
Beyond measure. Yes, please.
I will take some magnificent beyond measure, please and thank you.
Samesies, yeah.
A regular churchman and faithful husband, but headstrong, irascible, and unreasonable, with too great a passion for gambling.
It sounds like they're describing two separate people.
Two different personalities.
Yeah, there's the kingly, and then there's just the Raymond.
I hate to tell you this, Caroline. I think that you're going to be shocked with the lack of evidence for the incest.
I know. I'm still pushing it.
So,
Go.
He was married to Constance de Hauteville, and this little nugget is just too spicy not to tempt you with. Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem made Alice the Dowager Queen of Jerusalem believe that Raymond came to Antioch to marry her.
She is his future mother-in-law.
Yes.
Magnificent beyond measure.
Well, that did not happen. Instead, he married her 8-year-old.
What?
However, Constance, the 8-year-old in question, was kidnapped from the palace, and Ralph Domfront blessed her marriage to Raymond in the cathedral. With the marriage, Raymond became ruler of the principality, and Alice retired.
That is how you do a coup. Right there.
So,
that is how you take someone else's power. You marry their 8-year-old daughter and push them into retirement.
Is this an Aquitanian tradition?
The kidnapping, the escapades of men stealing women, it does seem to be genetic.
Yes. Antioch was a magnificent walled city which had been one of the richest in the Roman Empire. The language of the court at Antioch was... They say it's Eleanor's own Languedoc, but there's actually no historical evidence that she spoke it.
Well, of course she spoke it. It was the Aquitanian language.
It went out of fashion with her grandfather's court.
Oh, okay. But whatever it was, it would have been the language that Eleanor was used to as a child, because that's what her uncle would have continued to speak.
A lot of the later sources are like, yes, they could speak in this secret tongue together, and you're speaking in a secret tongue, your tongue is obviously swapping saliva, but there's not actually a lot of evidence that she
Burst
spoke.
and bubbles left and right.
This next part is going to be very painful for you, so I apologize. Their customs were likewise those of Aquitaine. Culturally, yes, I will give it to you, they had a ton of similarities. It was like coming home for her. Within a very short time, Eleanor and her uncle developed such rapport that King Louis became jealous and then suspicious.
He was a very young uncle.
Yes.
They were not ridiculously far away in age.
No, they were not.
And they'd also never met.
That's true. They'd had no relationship, essentially.
Until now.
And the situation was aggravated by the fact that Raymond thought that the Crusaders had come to restore Christian control over the county of Edessa.
Oops.
But Louis thought that he had come on pilgrimage, armed though it may be, to Jerusalem to fight the Seljuk Turks and all that, and insisted on continuing to the Holy City rather than following the Prince of Antioch's military advice. And at this junction, with Louis already jealous of Eleanor's close relationship, sexual or not, with Raymond, Louis was already pretty disillusioned with the idea of crusading. It's been a terrible time. He was focused only on reaching Jerusalem to complete a personal pilgrimage.
He had basically given up.
He did not want to be here.
On the notion of conquering.
Yeah, I just want to do the thing and go home. So Louis, according to John of Salisbury, became annoyed with, quote, the attentions paid by the prince to the queen, and his constant, indeed almost continuous conversation with her, aroused the king's suspicions, unquote. So Louis decided to leave Antioch, but Eleanor expressed a wish to stay with her uncle, backing his strategic desire to attack Aleppo and then move on to Edessa to secure his flank, blah, blah, blah. Raymond offered to keep Eleanor safe if the king would give his consent. But Louis most assuredly would not. John of Salisbury is the earliest account of the rumors that grew from the disagreement. Though he never comments on its veracity, he wrote that one of Louis's secretaries, who was frequently mocked by Eleanor, suggested that, quote, guilt under kinship's guise could lie concealed, unquote.
That is so roundabout.
Information from a eunuch who is consistently berated. Of course they're not going to have anything nice to say.
No.
Driven to distraction, Louis packed his things in the middle of the night, and Eleanor was, quote, torn away and forced to leave for Jerusalem, which is like the first time he's done anything remotely Aquitanian with kidnapping her in the middle of the night.
He's finally stepping up to the scandalous plate.
Eleanor questioned the validity of their marriage on the grounds of consanguinity in the heat of the moment.
Well, maybe we're just too closely related to make a baby.
William of Tyre was less discreet than John of Salisbury. Quote, contrary to her royal dignity, she disregarded her marriage vows and was unfaithful to her husband, unquote.
With her uncle.
Before she was kidnapped, she had announced that she and all her vassals would, in fact, remain in Antioch.
Yep.
Made a public scene.
She has had a little temper tantrum, and she has publicly said, I'm supporting my uncle over my husband.
Her forces at this point make up the bulk of what's left of the Crusades.
Yeah.
Eleanor retorted that the marriage, of course, was invalid and demanded an annulment. Louis responded by having her arrested and kidnapped her in the middle of the night and carried her away by force. Eleanor was not mentioned in the sources after this incident. Mm-mm. Before we move on, you are still firmly in the camp of they definitely hooked up.
I am not firmly in that camp. I don't think as a historian you should be firmly in a camp where there is such biased sources. I think it is very possible. I think that they did not have an uncle-niece relationship. I think that he was a very handsome man. I think that they spoke the same language either literally or just culturally. I mean, I can see it. I can see that this woman has suffered greatly. She's been on this terrible crusade. Her husband is not what she was looking for. And then she meets this guy who loves her for the familial relationship, and things can move quickly. Yeah, I think it easily could have happened.
I don't think they had sex. But I think both of them were smart enough to know and infer what people would think and imagine. And I think by the time that they got to Antioch, Eleanor was out and she went to her uncle and said, I'm done with this marriage. I need out. How can we do it?
Yes. And he was like, let's pretend to have an affair.
That was not what I was going to say.
What were you going to say?
I was going to say, kill two birds in one stone. You have Louis and the military stay and take Aleppo to secure the flank. And oh my gosh, whoopsie daisy, the King of France just magically dies.
Oh, murderous intent.
That's what I think.
I like it.
I don't think they had sex. But I definitely think that he was in on some sort of a plan to help her get out of this marriage.
I concur with the second half. I don't have enough information about the first half. I don't know.
Yeah. In April, after an increasingly pressing letter from Abbot Suger urging Louis to return, the couple left Jerusalem in separate ships, obviously a symptom of their worsening relationship. The couple made their way to Tusculum, where they visited Pope Eugenius to debrief him on the failures of the crusade, which, like, God, if that's not being sent to the principal's office, I don't know what is.
Oh my lord.
During the visit, Eugenius forbade the couple under pain of anathema that no word should be spoken against the marriage and that it would not be dissolved under any pretext whatsoever. Do not mention consanguinity. Yeah. Do not pass go, do not collect $200. You are staying in this marriage. And he even provided a bed for them to sleep together that he personally blessed.
Not just blessed, he provided them with his own fancy sheets.
Yes.
Which, like, ew.
He also attempted mediation in the royal marriage, basically ordered them to sleep together.
He told Louis, you're allowed to sleep with your wife. In fact, your pope is commanding it.
A very, and I do mean very temporary, reconciliation must have been conceived because they did it at least once. And their second daughter, Alex, was born within a year.
Pope has skills. Matchmaking skills.
He's got something. But it's a girl. So we're back at square one with no heir. In late September 1151, Eleanor and Louis began their final trip into the lands that Eleanor had inherited from her father. There were Frankish garrisons in the major towns, and they had to be withdrawn peacefully and orderly before the marriage could be ended.
I mean, it would be very hard to disentangle a country. Getting a divorce is very messy. Although I think Aquitaine was pretty okay with it.
I'm sure there was like a general sigh of relief.
On both sides.
And they got divorced. She went to her childhood home, and Louis returned to Paris. Eleanor was once again the unmarried heiress to Aquitaine, and at risk of being seized and married at the point of sword.
And we will learn why next week.
And that, my friends, is that.
I'm Caroline.
And I'm Erica, and we are Pithily Yours.
This episode is brought to you by the Pithy Chronicle, LLC. The Pithy Chronicle is intended for education, entertainment, and non-commercial purposes. Any views or opinions expressed in this podcast are personal and do not represent those of people, institutions, or organizations that the owner may or may not be associated with in a professional or personal capacity. While we offer lots of sarcasm, this podcast does not offer any advice or services. Listening to this podcast may induce fits of laughter, unexpected distraction, or uncontrollable rage at the subjects, hopefully not at us. We hope you learned something today. If not, so sorry. Please be advised we are not experts in the following fields: medical, legal, financial, technological, thermonuclear engineering, submarine warfare, neuroscience, or cat husbandry. Thanks for listening to our little disclaimer. Just covering our history-loving asses. Bye!